Hello, so today I'm going to be presenting about the Mojave Desert ecosystem, and I'm going to be starting by talking about the location. So in the presentation slides, I have included a map of where the Mojave Desert is located. It occupies a large portion of Southern California, runs into the bottom section of Nevada through Las Vegas, and covers a small section of Arizona and Utah. In the last century, the number of bird species in the Mojave Desert has been cut in half, likely due to a drastic reduction in rainfall and an increase in temperature as a result of climate change. Experts have observed 20% less rainfall overall in the Mojave Desert compared to previous observations in the region, which already had experienced sparse levels of rainfall. As rainfall is one of the desert's only water sources, this reduction in rainfall, along with the region's rising temperatures, forces desert species to migrate to other environments and affects their ability to survive in the Mojave. North American deserts with similar weather conditions and species include the Chihuahuan, Sonoran, and Great Basin, all deserts which are very dry and generally hot in the summers and warm to cool other times during the year. As is such in the Mojave Desert, rainfall is also very scarce in these deserts. They also have many of the same plants and animals, such as cacti, ocotillo, insects, reptiles, and birds. Many of the animal species burrow in cool places during the day and come out to eat and drink at night. Similar to the Mojave Desert, the Atacama of Chile and McMurdo dry valleys in Antarctica are incredibly dry, and like the Mojave, these regions are home to species that have adapted to these dry conditions. The Mojave Desert is covered in biological soil crusts, which are characteristic of a wide range of ecosystems, from hot deserts to polar regions. This soil contains cyanobacteria, more commonly known as green algae, that serves to protect the soil from erosion. The soil also absorbs rainfall, essential in the Mojave Desert, where water and rain is very scarce. The desert experiences less than 10 centimeters, or 5 inches, of rainfall per year. Biological soil crusts are formed when vascular plants surround the crust, nourishing the soil with cyanobacteria, fungi, lichens, and other organic matter. Then the crusts provide carbon to surrounding plants to support their fertility and decomposition. The Mojave Desert contains 3 sections: the West Mojave, the Central Mojave, and the East Mojave. Each have different weather patterns. In the West Mojave, the climate is generally cool during the winter, reaching as low as 8 degrees Fahrenheit, and summer weather is much warmer. The West Mojave's proximity to the ocean keeps summer temperatures from reaching as high as they do in the Central and Eastern Mojave. Rainfall occurs mostly during winter storms, and snowfall is also frequent during the winter season. In the Central Mojave, winter temperatures generally are not as low as in the Western and Eastern Mojave, while summer temperatures are much hotter here than in the other 2 regions, reaching as high as 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Although occasionally rain falls in the Central Mojave, the area is much drier and rain is less common than in the Western or Eastern regions. Winds can reach high speeds in this region and blow year-round, although rates of winds reduce from November to January. The East Mojave tends to be cooler during the winter than in the West and Central Mojave, with rates of rainfall surpassing that of either of the other 2 regions and supporting the growth of vegetation in the area. The amount of rainfall in the East Mojave is similar in both summer and winter. The weather conditions in the West Mojave provide the necessary conditions to support plant life in the spring, and rainfall in the Eastern Mojave supports the growth of vegetation in the region. Although rates of rainfall are generally low in the Mojave Desert, plants and animals have adapted to this environment. Animals often obtain water through consumption of plants and animals in order to survive, as well as relying on occasional rainfall. For instance, cacti have adapted to the harsh weather conditions in the desert by forming their own shade, defending themselves from the heat of the desert and conserving water content. The ecosystem also contains phreatophytes that have developed long taproots to assist them in absorbing water buried in the ground. Perennials in the desert grow leaves, photosynthesize, and exert energy during the warmer months, and become dormant and conserve energy during the winter months. Although it might seem unlikely for animal species to survive in these conditions, several species have adapted to the environment, and some species are even endemic to the Mojave Desert. The Mojave Desert is home to owls and bats, nocturnal animals that only are awake and move at night during low temperatures. Other animals, such as reptiles and insects, have adapted to be active in cool temperatures and retreat to cool, moist burrows to protect themselves from midday heat. Bird species in the desert avoid the heat by flying high in the air. During hot seasons, birds and other species migrate to areas experiencing lower temperatures and return to the desert during cooler months. Many species have developed ways to cool themselves down in the desert. Owls evaporate water from their mouths, and vultures excrete feces and urine through their cloaca onto their legs, which later cools them down via evaporation. Some physiological structures, such as the blood vessel-lined ears of the jackrabbit, give rise to thermoregulation in Mojave Desert animals. Some species in this habitat hibernate during hot seasons or during periods of limited food sources, reappearing in the cooler months to obtain food and water. Climate change has severely jeopardized bird species in the Mojave Desert, leading to a severe reduction in rainfall and water availability in the region. Industrial development and the creation of national parks in the Mojave have brought an influx of thousands of people to visit the park daily. These combined factors have disturbed the ecosystem, interfering with the ability for plants and animals to adapt to changing conditions and contributing to warmer temperatures and decreased water and food sources, leading to the starvation and dehydration of animals, many of which die due to an inability to survive in these conditions. Additional human impacts include water and resource extraction, leading to depleted groundwater tables and contamination from mining, the forced arrival of invasive species by humans, which disrupts the environment, grazing, habitat loss, increased wildfire risk, and urban air pollution affecting the region. Some of the major plant species in the Mojave Desert are the all-scale or cattle saltbrush, whose scientific name is Atriplex polycarpa, brittlebrush, whose scientific name is Encelia farinosa, and the desert holly, whose scientific name is Atriplex hymenaletra. Because of lower salt content in the species' soils, competition with more aggressive species harms the Atriplex polycarpa. The Encelia farinosa has developed short, hairy leaves that aid in insulation against the heat and cold, as well as aid in water and moisture absorption. The Atriplex hymenaletra needs very little water to survive and bodes well in desert areas. It absorbs water from areas of soil that other plants are unable to reach. Some endemic plant species in the Mojave Desert are the Joshua tree, whose scientific name is the Yucca brevifolia, the Mojave prickly pear, whose scientific name is Opuntia echinocarpa, and the spiny Menadora, whose scientific name is Menadora spinescens. The foxtail cactus and sticky buckwheat are threatened plant species in the Mojave Desert. The Sahara mustard, or the Brassica terniforti, is a Mojave Desert species that has become recently invasive. It can cause wildfires if not managed or controlled, and I will be talking about the management of the Sahara mustard later in this presentation. 3 mammal and bird species found in this desert ecosystem are the bighorn sheep, or the Ovis canadensis, the coyote, or the Canis latrans, and the Leconte's thrashers, or Toxostoma leconte. The bighorn sheep has an incredible climbing ability and can travel through the rocky terrain of the Mojave Desert with ease. They can survive with limited water and are able to evade most predators. They absorb maximum nutritional value from their food, improving their survival, and they have a lifespan of 10 to 15 years. Although many believe coyotes to be carnivores, they eat plants as well, which expands their food source in the Mojave. They also have an impressive ability to adapt to changing environments, which is beneficial amid the frequent habitat destruction of the Mojave. Coyotes are mostly nocturnal, but you can also spot them during the day. The Leconte's thrasher is hard to track down and is attracted to the Mojave's airy and open areas. They are xerophiles, meaning they require scarce amounts of water to survive, which is essential in the dry climate of the Mojave Desert, which produces less than 5 inches of rainfall per year. They obtain most of their nutrients through the consumption of arthropods and desert shrubs. The Mojave ground squirrel, or the Spermophilus mojavensis, and the Amargosa vole, or the Microtus californicus scarpensis, are endemic to the Mojave Desert. Some threatened mammal and bird species of the Mojave Desert are the Amargosa vole and the Mexican spotted owl, and endangered species include the California brown pelican, the Yuma clapper rail, and the least Bell's vireo. The Mojave Desert is home to the Gila monster, or the Heloderma suspectum, the giant hairy scorpion, or the Hadrurus arizonensis, and the desert pupfish, or Cyprinodon macularius. Gila monsters are the largest native lizards in the United States, growing up to 20 inches long, and are one of the only 2 venomous lizards in the world. They are only found in the Sonoran, Mojave, and Chihuahuan deserts, living in underground burrows. Gila monsters are carnivores and are slow hunters, running at a maximum of 1 mile per hour. Their diets include eggs and newborn mammals, and they can survive for months without food. Other adaptations include their venomous saliva from their jaw glands, which they use to defend themselves from predators. The giant hairy scorpion is the largest scorpion in North America, growing up to 5 to 6 inches. They live in small caves in the Sonoran and Mojave Desert, and they can live up to 10 years in the wild. Giant hairy scorpions are carnivorous eaters, their diet consisting of insects, invertebrates, lizards, and small mammals. They use venom stored in their stingers to stun their prey. The desert pupfish can tolerate extreme environmental conditions and have adapted well to the Mojave Desert. They are an aquatic species that thrives in isolated habitats and can live in very small bodies of water. They are able to withstand extreme temperatures and heavy levels of salt in water. The desert pupfish lives for 1 to 3 years. And desert pupfish are omnivores, their diet consisting of algae, plants, and small invertebrates. They have adapted the ability to dig beneath soil to locate prey. Some endemic reptile, insect, and fish species of the Mojave Desert include the desert tortoise, whose scientific name is the Gopherus agassizi, the Kelso Dunes Jerusalem cricket, whose scientific name is Amopelmatus kelsoensis, and the desert pupfish, whose scientific name is Cyprinodon macularis. Some endangered and threatened species in this ecosystem include the fringe-toed lizard, the desert tortoise, lowland leopard frog, bony-tailed chub, and Colorado squawfish. About 50% of the Mojave Desert has been disturbed and compromised by human activity. Some areas of the Mojave Desert are privately owned, which can fragment and potentially destroy habitats. Urbanization and suburbanization has served to damage the region and harm its species. The biggest threat to the Mojave Desert is human-induced climate change associated with rises in temperature, reduction in food and water availability, the introduction of invasive species, and industrial development, all factors affecting species survivability. The Sahara mustard, or Brassica terniforti, and wild geraniums, or Erodium secutarium, increase risk of wildfires in the Mojave Desert. These species are growing rapidly, which makes their management and control more difficult. However, environmental organizations are working hard to manage the impact of these plant species. The most commonly used strategy is hand weeding, involving pulling out the weeds by hand. Typically, this method is very effective, but due to the vast number of species affecting the area, it is not very efficient. Scientists think a better solution might be the use of a fast-degrading herbicide used at a time of the year when the invasive plants are most vulnerable to its effects and when native species are least likely to be harmed. Some nonprofit and government agencies advocating for the preservation of the Mojave Desert are the Mojave National Preserve Artists Foundation, which supports artists who focus on the history, land, and life of the Mojave Desert to promote conservation. The Mojave Desert Land Trust, which reduces the amount of privately owned land to prevent fragmentation of the desert. The Mojave National Preserve Conservancy, which promotes the ecological history and integrity of the Mojave. The California Department of Parks and Recreation, which preserves the ecosystem's biological diversity, and the Office of Grants and Local Services, which provides grants to the Mojave Desert to fund its protection. Some of the parks and preserves similar to this ecosystem are Death Valley National Park, Joshua Tree National Park, Mojave National Preserve, Kelso Dunes, Sema Dome, and the Hole in the Wall Cliffs. I unfortunately have not yet visited any of the parks associated with the Mojave Desert, but I would love to go to Death Valley National Park to experience the intense weather conditions and observe how this and other factors affect the ecosystem and influence the type of species inhabiting the region. The Mojave Desert occupies a large portion of Southern California and stretches into the bottom section of Nevada and covers a small section of Arizona and Utah. For most areas of the Mojave, a car can be used as a primary source of transportation. In order to reach certain areas of the region, hiking on trails is necessary.